bodies of the Hollywood legend and his wife, Betsy, were discovered.
Some breaking news, and Hollywood actor Gene Hackman has been found dead in his New Mexico home.
French Connection, The Conversation, Superman. Gene Hackman has died at the age of 95.
Gene Hackman didn't simply depart this world. He left behind a riddle wrapped in dollar signs and mysteries. To the public, he was the Hollywood icon with an acclaimed career that transcended generations. Yet in his final moments, he became the keeper of secrets worth far more than any film role. Rumors spoke of an $80 million hoard, enough to spark feuds that echoed beyond the grave. But that money wasn't just a blessing. It was a curse that would fracture every fragile bond in the Hackman lineage. His outward persona, always calm and collected, had fooled millions. Even in the twilight of his life, many assumed he enjoyed a gentle retirement in Santa Fe, far removed from the bright lights and red carpets that once consumed his time. Unbeknownst to them, it was behind closed doors that his greatest struggles raged, a silent war with his own children, shadowy investments, and personal regrets scribbled in diaries that no one read until it was too late. If you want the full story, the heartbreaks, betrayals, and shocking truths behind Hackman's quietly devastating exit, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. We're about to uncover the layers of a hidden world he left behind, a jigsaw puzzle of secrets that neither time nor legal battles could fully bury. The illusion of a peaceful departure. One might imagine that a man as seasoned in the limelight as Gene Hackman would have orchestrated an ornate finale, complete with star-studded tributes and tearful interviews. Strangely enough, the opposite happened. In his final years, he slipped into near-total seclusion. Word leaked out that the Santa Fe sunsets had become his only company. Locals occasionally whispered about the tall, slender man with a deeply lined face, pedaling along dusty paths on a battered bicycle. His form was familiar, yet so quiet and unassuming that few dared approach him. For the average onlooker, this was the picture of a Hollywood great finally finding tranquility. But the more you learn about Hackman's last chapter, the more you realize he was haunted by ghosts of his own making. It wasn't merely a quest for rural peace. It was an active retreat from everything he once held dear, including his children. Subtle rumors painted a grim portrait: health in decline, unacknowledged pains, and a growing chasm between him and a family he was convinced he had irreversibly failed. Even at the pinnacle of success, Hackman displayed a tendency to vanish without explanation for weeks at a time. He'd reappear on set without so much as a greeting, deliver an unforgettable performance, then vanish again. Some labeled this behavior as artistic eccentricity, but those close to him suspected a deeper motivation: an innate discomfort with personal attachments. The illusions of a gentle departure were part of that same pattern, quietly slipping away, avoiding messy farewells, and shutting down dialogues that might expose the fractures in his life. Behind the facade of peace, tension brewed like thunderclouds on the horizon, waiting for the inevitable storm. Childhood struggles and rapid rise to fame. Many regarded Gene Hackman's rise to stardom as a triumphant underdog story. He was born to humble beginnings, far from the privileged enclaves of Los Angeles or New York. His father left when Hackman was young, and in countless interviews, Hackman hinted that this absence shaped his perspective on family and responsibility. After serving in the Marines, Hackman meandered through odd jobs: ushers, truck drivers, even short stints as a doorman, before stumbling onto the acting world. At first, the idea of performing on stage or in front of a camera seemed like an unattainable fantasy for someone with no connections and little formal education. Yet Hackman's raw talent and resolve couldn't be ignored for long. With determination, he catapulted from theater roles to film spots, ultimately landing roles that would define an era of Hollywood. Critics praised his authenticity, describing him as a performer who could channel every ounce of struggle from his upbringing into the characters he portrayed. Hollywood soon recognized this intangible quality, a mix of grit and vulnerability, and propelled him to the forefront of some of the most memorable films of his generation. Though success provided him with money, prestige, and influence, it also unleashed new demons. The sweeping wave of attention introduced him to the seductive illusions of control over his public image, his finances, and even, as we'd soon discover, the personal relationships that orbited his life. The boy who'd once worn tattered shoes now stood on red carpets, crossing paths with the highest echelons of the movie industry. But behind every smile he offered to the cameras, the seeds of internal conflict were already taking root. His father's departure had etched scars that, in time, may have fueled Hackman's own distance from his children. In many ways, the unstoppable ambition that fueled his success in Hollywood also paved the way for the secrets and walls he constructed around his private life. The world saw an icon. Deep inside, Hackman might still have been that poor boy, gripping the edges of his newfound power, terrified to let anyone close enough to see him tremble. A family torn by Hollywood's spotlight. During his early stardom, Hackman married Faye Maltese. Their marriage lasted over 3 decades, but behind the optics of a Hollywood power couple lay simmering discord. Critics, admirers, and even close friends assumed their partnership was rock solid. What they didn't see was how fame formed the unspoken barrier between them. While Hackman's face lit up screens worldwide, Faye shouldered the mundane reality of raising their children, Christopher, Elizabeth, and Leslie, often alone. The children scarcely experienced anything resembling a normal family dynamic. Birthdays, school events, and spontaneous father-child moments were overshadowed by Hackman's ceaseless film schedules. There were times he went months without setting foot in the family home. Even in those fleeting moments he was physically present, his mind never seemed to detach from upcoming productions. Elizabeth, in particular, described the heartbreak of waiting for her father's attention, only to watch him disappear yet again for a photo shoot or a last-minute meeting. The final unraveling came in the form of a tense divorce, concluding their 30-year marriage. Some said there were screaming matches behind closed doors. Others claimed it ended in a numb, exhausted acceptance of what was always fated to break. Hackman remarried Betsy Arakawa, a pianist nearly 30 years younger. The public tried to label it as a midlife crisis or a desperate bid for romantic revival. But in truth, it seemed Hackman did yearn for companionship, just on his own rigid terms. His relationships with his children soured further. Occasional tensions flared over finances, recognition, or simply old wounds that had never been properly addressed. Holidays became sporadic, sometimes non-existent. Elizabeth confessed in one rare interview that her father's presence was more a memory than a reality. He was always out there, famous, iconic, distant. I never knew the real him. This was the atmosphere that reigned in the Hackman lineage, love buried under scabs of disappointment, overshadowed by glittering achievements that offered no real warmth. The hidden fortune and the mysterious shadow fund. For a man as revered as Gene Hackman, it was unsurprising to learn he'd amassed a considerable fortune. What did shock everyone, including his family, was the elaborate structure of his finances. After years of secrecy, rumors began to swirl that his net worth substantially exceeded the conservative estimates quoted in tabloids. The real figure in question, an astonishing $80 million, possibly more. Those who scratched beneath the surface realized Hackman wasn't just an actor. He was a master of stealthy financial management. Since the 1990s, he'd invested aggressively in everything from emerging tech firms and real estate to foreign startups whose names the family had never even heard of. A labyrinth of offshore shell companies concealed his involvement so meticulously that even the family's lawyers were left in the dark. The real puzzle was a so-called untouched fund, a separate entity rumored to have been established in 1993. No one knew who managed it or precisely how vast it was. The scarce details that did emerge pointed to a single truth. Hackman had gone to great lengths to ensure no one could gain control of this wealth, except himself. Some speculated it was his form of insurance, a fallback to guarantee that he could vanish any time he felt threatened by the constraints of fame or family obligations. Once the existence of the shadow fund came to light, it ignited a firestorm of legal inquiries and familial suspicion. Why hide so much? Had Hackman truly distrusted his own children that profoundly? Or was there a deeper, darker motive behind his refusal to share the full extent of his assets? Whispers of heartbreak lingered around these questions, but no answers were immediately forthcoming. The man who had built an entire career on strong, domineering characters evidently applied those traits to real life, allowing him to guard his secrets as tightly as Hollywood guarded its biggest blockbusters. Dark connections and whispers of unresolved debts. As reporters, financial sleuths, and Hackman's own family members dug deeper, they stumbled upon more than just hidden investments. Faint traces led to shadowy circles in Hollywood. Those rumored enclaves where fortunes, reputations, and sometimes entire productions hinged on hush deals and well-placed bribes. Hackman was never publicly named in any criminal case, but accusations surfaced now and then, suggesting he was far from naive when it came to making connections in high and occasionally low places. An old rumor singled out a certain Frankie the Fox, an infamous figure from Tinseltown's underbelly. Some claimed Hackman had dealt with Frankie decades ago, perhaps to secure specialized protection or to keep certain private matters under wraps. Whether it was hush money, personal debts, or even a misguided attempt at philanthropic help for an old friend, nobody truly knew. What was clear is that Hackman, in the latter half of his career, made certain money transfers to individuals and groups that had no obvious connection to his legitimate business ventures. None of these revelations would have necessarily tarnished Hackman's name, if he had been alive to clarify or deny the claims. But with him gone, curiosity spiraled into speculation. Every uncovered financial note, every cryptic phone record, only fueled the idea that Hackman existed in two worlds: the beloved actor recognized on screen, and the elusive puppeteer who quietly orchestrated deals behind closed doors. For the Hackman family, particularly Christopher, Elizabeth, and Leslie, this was a revelation that hit like a punch to the gut. They had grown up with the outward image of a father who maintained strict moral boundaries. The possibility that he might have consorted with unsavory Hollywood figures felt like a betrayal. Yet, at the same time, they realized they were dealing with a man who believed in controlling his own destiny above all else, even if it meant forging questionable alliances. Unsent letters, shattered hopes. Amid the legal turmoil, the family made a startling discovery in the Santa Fe home. Boxes stuffed with unsent letters addressed to each of Hackman's children, dating back decades. Written in his unmistakable, sometimes shaky handwriting, these letters offered confessions that never saw the light of day. They ranged from short apologies, "I know I left too many questions unanswered," to lengthy reflections on fatherhood, regret, and the torment he felt at being perpetually absent from their lives. Some letters were tear-stained, the ink smudged by what appeared to be raw emotion that Hackman rarely let slip in public. One especially poignant letter addressed to his youngest daughter, Elizabeth, read, "I wanted to protect you from the burden of living in my shadow, but I realize my absence became another kind of burden. I hope one day you'll forgive me." The heartbreak Elizabeth must have felt, holding tangible proof that her father cared but never found the courage to say these words aloud, is unimaginable. Worse still, the letters revealed Hackman's own sense of isolation. He admitted that every financial fortress he'd built was partly a response to his fear of repeating his own father's abandonment. By the time these confessions emerged, it was far too late for closure. Apologies remained ink on paper, the emotional chasms frozen in time. It was a reminder that money cannot mend relationships left to wither, nor erase years of silent resentments. The irony was palpable. The man revered worldwide for delivering perfect lines on cue couldn't deliver a single heartfelt conversation to the people he loved most. For many fans who worshipped Hackman's artistry, the revelations of his personal heartbreak only added depth to the mystique. For his children, it reopened wounds they had tried so hard to bury. The final battle over Hackman's legacy. When the dust started to settle around Hackman's funeral, another storm began brewing, the legal matter of his will. Initially, the inheritance seemed modest. Listed assets in Santa Fe, a vintage Hudson Hornet, a few accounts. But after thorough digging, the truth emerged in waves. Hackman had official documents spanning hundreds of pages, each loaded with conditions as rigid as the roles he portrayed on screen. Any family member who dared to challenge certain terms would lose their inheritance altogether. Using his name or likeness for exploitative projects, such as sensationalized biographies or unauthorized documentaries, was strictly forbidden. Even discussing the hidden financial web beyond closed legal settings risked incurring the wrath of these ironclad clauses. The children were stunned. This was their father. Yet, in many respects, he was as distant in death as he was in life. Betsy Arakawa, Hackman's second wife, who had lived with him through many of these secretive chapters, expressed a mixture of sorrow and resignation. She might have known a fraction more than the others, but even she was left reeling at the scale of Hackman's attempts to control his narrative beyond the grave. While some corners of the media spun the story as a glamorous puzzle, the legendary Hackman's secret treasures, the family faced a darker reality. Their father had effectively manipulated them one final time. The inheritance might have been worth tens of millions, but the emotional cost of receiving it under such constraints was incalculably high. How do you grieve a father's death when the father you thought you knew never truly existed?